Adrienne. I am a psychic medium, an energy worker, energy intuitive, and a Akashic reader. I'm just starting a channel to talk about my journey on becoming a psychic medium. I think there are, especially nowadays, a lot more people out there who are also on this journey, and I just want to share information that would have been helpful for me along the way, things that I learned that I feel could be helpful for other people to pass along. So yeah, that's what this channel is about. And I just want to start out by kind of talking through my journey of how I got here, kind of the circumstances that led me to this point. Okay, when was the first time I realized that I was psychic, or thought I might be psychic? So that would be 2022, early 2022. I had started having these like crazy experiences. So for example, I'd be in my car driving to see someone, and I would suddenly just get all these like a download of either information or like physical sensations, like a physical experience. And the first time it happened, I remember thinking like, what is this? Like I just got all this like rush of emotions, and I was like, what is this? And then I heard a voice say, ask it whose it is. As in like ask whose feelings they are. Okay, whose are these? And the answer immediately came, and it was the person who I was going to see. And that was like such an interesting experience that really, even just that process of like hearing the voice telling me to ask who it belonged to was like, oh, okay, like that really set me up for a lot of the experiences that were to come. So that kept happening. I had an experience where I went to see an energy worker to get work done on me, to have an energy session for myself. And first of all, this person definitely was someone I feel was incredibly synchronistic, because one time I went to see her, the night before I went, I had a vision of an owl come to me at night, and I had never had that before. That was the first time I had like a vision. It was very vivid. And the next day, she had said during the session, she said, your spirit animal's here, do you want to meet them? I said, okay. She said, well, it's an owl, and they're here to guide you, they're here to help you. And she kind of talked through what that was about and why it was an owl, and it was all about like wisdom and inner wisdom and finding the answers within. But you know, that was incredibly synchronistic. Things like that just kept happening. Like the next time I went to see her, on the way over there, the license plate in front of me literally had owl on it. And then I actually ended up, so I guess my point with these synchronicities was like, I really felt like I was meant to meet her, because that was definitely like a catalyst, because the first time I ever gave like a message to someone was with her, because I was having a session with her, and someone that had crossed over in her family came through and gave me a message to give to her. And I didn't really understand what was happening. I just kept hearing, ask her about, and I just kept hearing a name. And I was like, ask her about blank. And so by the end of the session, like I was getting ready to leave, and I was like, okay, I gotta just ask her. And I asked like, do you recognize this name? And like she like broke down in tears immediately. And so it was someone who was connected to her that she hadn't been able to connect with. And that was the first time she had gone to mediums to connect with this person and it had never come through. And so that was like pretty wild. And so she really helped to encourage me. I think because it was with an energy worker, it was someone who I felt comfortable that I could share those experiences with, and like ask, like tell her about it and ask for her advice. Like, do you know what's like going on? Like, what is this? What's happening? So that was a really pivotal moment. And that really kind of helped to open my mind to it and helped to give me sort of guidance as to like what to do about it, like what questions to ask, kind of, and get like a sounding board of what was happening. So yeah, 2022 was sort of when that all started. And I do feel like because I started meditating in 2020, I think that also was a really important catalyst for that. I think because I had been meditating and had been working through a lot, and I'd been really connecting like inward, connecting with my own inner voice, and like really spending time in stillness, I think that really opened the way for those things to come through. So I do think that was really important. Now, if we want to go back to like, in my opinion, what the real catalyst was, then we got to go back to 2014. That was an extremely difficult time in my life. I lost someone very close to me. It was very sudden. It was a very kind of complicated situation. And essentially, I see that as dark night of the soul. If you're not familiar with Dark Night of the Soul is, it would be like the tarot card, or the tower card in tarot. Essentially, it's like, you could use the reference of the phrase rock bottom. It's like all of kind of the things that don't really matter all fall away and crumble, so that the real you can emerge. It like breaks down all the stuff, all the like walls you've built up, all the coping mechanisms, all the barriers, everything that you've built up to protect yourself that isn't authentic or that isn't serving you is like, it all just like falls away. Anything that's like not meant to be on your path, I really feel like dark night of the soul is sort of the universe's or your soul's way of like course correcting. And so experiencing that loss really was like a catalyst for me to go through that experience, which again, I really feel paved the way for where I am now. I mean, at the time when this happened, I was graduating from college. I was in a fashion management program because I wanted to become a fashion buyer. Sorry, one sec. And that's what I did, but it happened the month I was graduating from that program, about to go start my career. I'd worked really hard to get there and really felt like it was what I wanted to do. I was like excited about it, all that stuff. It felt right. Looking back now, I know that it really wasn't actually aligned for me. Really, if I'm being honest, what I should have done was fashion styling, which I have done. I did a little bit before that, and I do a little bit of that now, personal styling. I did some commercial styling, but essentially I chose something that felt safer and just felt like I would get sort of like the approval or validation that I was looking for at the time. So it was sort of in the realm of what was aligned, but it really was sort of based on decisions that weren't really coming from an authentic place. So essentially I went through like 10 years really of just like my life crumbling, essentially. Starting a career and trying to do my best and trying to cope, even in the beginning, just trying to cope with grief and loss. I also live in a city 2 hours away from my family, so it was pretty alone and pretty isolated and in a pretty dark place. And the other thing that period of my life brought me was connecting with spirit. So that changed my relationship. I had always been spiritual, I would say, not in like a necessarily really conscious way. I grew up going to church, but it wasn't something that was like shoved down our throats or anything. It was kind of more about like community. But I always believed in ghosts. I always believed that there was something bigger than ourselves. I wasn't super attached to the idea of like God specifically or anything like that. I just knew I always knew there was more. I always believed in ghosts. I believed in reincarnation. I believed in a soul. And my family was pretty similar in terms of belief system. So it's like that was there, and it was never really something that was looked down upon or anything. Like I had been to psychics before, and several people in my family were into that and would go and do that. So it was something that was acceptable, you could say. But so anyway, so after this loss, I started connecting with this person who had passed, and that became like a daily thing. And it really started to open my mind to other parts of the universe, and really sort of brought that aspect of life into my world in a much more kind of grounded way, I guess you could say, in an everyday sort of way, in a way that was like really like helping my well-being. And so that went on, I'd say for about 5 years. And then around the 5-year mark, after she had passed, I went to see a psychic medium who actually is now my mentor. And so I got a reading from her, mediumship reading, and she validated a lot of my conversations with this person who's passed. She was validating that I was talking to this person. She referenced specific conversations we were having. And the point being, she was validating that this was real. She's like, you know, you do this, but there's a part of you that doesn't really believe that this is real, or you doubt it, which is very common. Most people do this. Especially now that I do mediumship readings, I see that doubt in people where they feel something deep down. They have this deep knowing, but their like logical mind and like society and their ego tries to like talk them out of believing it. So that reading really had a huge impact on my life, not only in my healing journey, but also in my connection with the other side and the spiritual world, the energetic realm. That was 2019, and then 2020, during COVID, I started meditating. I got really into, Joe Dispenza. He's wonderful, check him out. All about like the science behind meditation. But he's also like mystical, kind of like on the down low. So it was a good combo and a good way to like understand sort of the mechanism behind how our heart and our mind functions to connect with the universe and with the other side. So, and these other realms and everything. So there was definitely a series of events that led to me getting to this point, obviously. Now I look back and even before 2014, I can see like the breadcrumbs. Like now I recognize that I was getting information all the time and just wasn't aware of it. I think I was really overwhelmed. If you're into human design, then you would know. So if you're into human design, I'm a projector, so projector, and I have my energy centers. I only have 2 defined centers, so all of them are open except 2, which essentially this just means it's like being an empath on like steroids. It's like just being very, very porous to everything around you. I'm also a Pisces moon, so very tuned into other people's emotions and energies, but really was not aware of that up until a couple years ago. So looking back, I know that part of what was going on for me was I was like really overwhelmed energetically and emotionally, and didn't understand that what I was feeling, a lot of it was not mine. I also just didn't know how to cope with my feelings, and you know, there's all these other things. Attachment style definitely played into that too. So there's a lot of things I needed to work through, but again, the dark night of the soul really was when all of that stuff started to get processed and worked through and healed, and just like my awareness of it. And also went to therapy for several years, like love therapy, do it if you can. And so that really helped to kind of clear away a lot of stuff. As hard as loss is, grief, there's a quote I really love from Lee Harris, who's an energy intuitive and channeler. And he has a quote that grief is the great transformer. And it's completely true. If you allow it to, it will change your life for the better. So it really helped me to empty out a lot of stuff, not just from processing grief and loss from that loss of this person in my life, but years and years and years of grief and sadness and anger that just hadn't been processed from other things. And it was like a vacuum, and it was like, or like open the floodgates, and it was like all this stuff just started to come out, and it really was for the best. Now I'm a psychic medium. I've been doing readings since 2023. I started doing readings in the last year, 2024. I was much more like public and really like marketing myself more, and things have really sort of ramped up in the last couple months. And so yeah, I just wanted to kind of share my journey on how I got here and speak to some of the experiences that helped me to realize that I was psychic. And so I guess part 2 to this would be kind of how I dealt with those experiences and how I grew through them and worked through it. So let's dive into that. So I think I'm having like a throat chakra clearing happening right now. I've had like a blocked throat chakra for a long time, which, I mean, I don't know about you, but I really associate that with like not speaking your truth. And so it's a long time coming, but so we're working through the voice stuff. But anyway, so to speak more specifically to kind of the psychic experiences. So as I said, so 2022, started having experiences just like on my own, doing regular things. And then I started seeing an energy worker where those experiences started to like ramp up. So if you think about the clairsenses, so clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, there's 6 of them all together. So essentially just means clear, so clear, and then the sense. So clairvoyance would be clear seeing, clear hearing, clear feeling. So essentially I was just getting these like psychic hits or downloads or experiences through those different senses. So for me, I would say my strongest is clairsentience, which essentially means I feel a lot of stuff physically. That was sort of my that was my strongest sense to begin with, for sure. Not only just experiencing the information physically, but also feeling people's feelings, like physically experiencing their feelings, which there actually is a word for that too. It's not the same thing as clairsentience, from what I understand. So, but that was sort of predominantly how those things would happen. So working with an energy worker was really helpful, or even just working with someone who's experienced these things can be really helpful. One, because I think most people, their instinct is to think that they're like crazy, which is not the case. We all have intuition. Like everyone has that, and everyone has the ability, I believe, to be psychic. Like everyone has access to these abilities. It's just A, like how much are you paying attention? B, how many like layers are on top of it? C, how much do you resist that? And ultimately it's like you can either say yes to it or not. Like I could have easily just have said like no to these things that were happening, but for me it really felt right. Like it just like made sense. What was happening in my life, like I'd been a buyer for almost 10 years, and at the same time that this was happening, I got laid off. And so I pursued, I initially was like, I'm gonna go pursue commercial styling, which is what which is what I should have done all along. I feel, I mean, I don't regret the path I took. I mean, I still learned a lot. And so it's not a bad thing, but I was like, you know what, I've always wanted to do styling. Like I'm gonna go do this now. I've just been laid off. So I went to do that. And for me personally, and commercial styling is essentially you're just styling like commercials, ad campaigns, I guess you could consider like music videos. It's essentially just not editorial, which editorial is like magazines, like that type of thing, or like just like creative. So I got into that and then was like, this is not meaningful to me. At the end of the day, I'm selling stuff, which is what I was doing before and buying. And I was like, I can't go from like one pile of crap to another. And like no shade at all if you do any of these things and you love it, like someone needs to buy the stuff that we purchase, right? Like someone needs to make these campaigns and advertisements, like, and there's people out there who do an amazing job and really love it, and that's great. Like no judgment at all. For me, it just wasn't right. And I mean, one of the biggest reasons why I was so unhappy in buying is because it didn't feel meaningful to me. I didn't feel like I was helping anyone. And for me, that was important, especially after my experience of loss. You know, loss and grief can really shine a light on what's actually important. It's like all the other shit falls away, you know, and you're left just like with the only things that matter. And to me, it was like, I don't feel like I'm doing something meaningful for me. So I did styling, commercial styling for about 6 months and just was like, I don't want to do this. So like I'll shift into personal styling. That was something I'd played around with. I've helped people with personal styling like most of my life, and like organization, closet organization. So I was like, I'll shift into that because that feels more meaningful to me at least, and just kind of like see how it goes. And all the while, all my psychic stuff was like ramping up. And so by January 2023, it was like, well, like maybe this is it. Like maybe this is the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. Like, and that at that moment, like that's when so my point is, that's when I said yes. I was like, yes, I'm gonna like explore this and like see what this is and see what this is about. Because in the beginning too, you're like, I don't really know what this is. Like, am I psychic? Is this just like a fluke? I had a lot of that. Like, is this a fluke? Is it gonna go away? Like, you know, if you'd go a little while without having an experience, which for a while it was happening pretty consistently. Like I'd say like a couple times a week I would have something would happen, like some crazy thing would happen. But there've been periods of time where like nothing's really happening, and then you're like, oh, is it going away? Like, did I lose it? You know? So in the beginning you're like, I don't really know what this is. So it was like, let's see. So yeah, I was sort of just like figuring things out. You know, I'd gotten a severance package when I got laid off, so I was like, I got some time, let's just like figure out what I want to do, figure out what this is, explore it a little bit. And so I ended up taking a class on the Akashic Records, reading the Akashic Records. And that was really like my entry point for me. That was how I really got started doing readings. Because so I took the class, and then as part of that, they'd say like, okay, now go and like practice, find people to practice on. And I had like incredible experiences doing readings for people. Like I was just doing like, the first person I did reading for was my best friend, and she's to this day, so it was one of the most profound experiences she's ever had. And that was like, not only was that like, wow, like first of all, like so meaningful that I did something that had such a positive effect on someone. It was so meaningful like for her. So that first of all in itself, and then also was like, okay, like I mean, I can do that, like it's happening, right? So I kept going. So she's a personal trainer, so she has clients who she'd get talking to about it and they'd be interested. And so so she'd recommend people to me, and like shout out to her, she's literally the best friggin' girl in the whole world, like best friend you could ever ask for. She's friggin' amazing. Love you, girl. And so yeah, in the beginning I was just doing free readings. A lot of people came from her. You know, it was sort of like it was like people who were, you know, kind of all into the same thing, into like spirituality and that sort of thing. So I would do free readings, and it was, in the beginning, was really just like, let's just like see, like, can I do that? Can I keep doing this? Will it keep happening? Was it a fluke? Like, what's the reaction from these people? Like, are they enjoying it? You know, and the feedback was really great. Like, people really loved it. And I really enjoyed doing it. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like keep going. So yeah, in the beginning it was just for free. I wasn't charging anything for it. And then I would say the summer of 2023, I started charging. And around that time, I also was thinking like, okay, like if I'm gonna do this for work, I'm like, I feel like there was like a feeling that I needed to add something to it, like another skill. Like I need to be able to do something more than just this type of reading. So I had an assessment reading done with Arthur Findlay College, which is in the UK. The UK has a lot of resources and schools for like psychic development and mediumship, and like they're like way ahead of Western, like North America for sure. So I had an assessment reading done with a psychic. I'm not sure if she's a psychic medium or just a psychic, but I had an assessment done with her. She was great. Her name is Penny. And essentially the assessment is like, they help kind of guide you with like your abilities and like what they feel would be a good path for you to go, or what to pursue, like what feels aligned. So she had said mediumship. That was where she felt like I should pursue. And I was not surprised. I kind of had a feeling that that's what she was going to say. And to be honest, was a little like resistant or a little scared that that's what she would say. Because, you know, keep in mind, I had still, at this point, you know, I was still dealing with grief and loss and still working through that. And it was, I feel like I hadn't quite gotten to that point yet where it was like super easy necessarily to talk about. It just kind of felt like it was hitting a little close to home. So I was kind of like a little apprehensive, but like I knew deep down that that's what it was. And that's why like, it was like, I had a feeling she was going to say it, and I was like a little scared, but I knew deep down that like, I was like, yeah, I think she's right. So I ended up getting in touch with my now mentor, who I had the mediumship reading with in 2019. She's lives in a similar like area in the GTA, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, shout out. And so she was doing mentoring and training for people who were psychic or mediums and wanted to develop their mediumship abilities. So I started with her in 2023, fall of 2023, and that was a huge, huge, huge help. So essentially it was like a class of students on Zoom, and she was like teaching us, and we're practicing on each other and learning and developing our skills. And that was a huge help. Not only one, I think probably really at the end of the biggest thing was community. Now, especially if you're someone, if you don't have a lot of people that you can talk this stuff about, because, you know, obviously for some people this isn't even a part of their reality, like talking about psychics and mediumship and spirits and all that stuff. Like for a lot of people this isn't a part of their world. So if you don't have anyone in your life that you can talk to about this with, then community is going to be even more important. I'm super lucky in that my best friend super into this stuff too. My boyfriend is like a little skeptical, but open and like super supportive. So that wasn't something I really had to worry about. In the beginning, I just like didn't share everything. I share a lot more now. And again, he's open. It's just, you know, he's a little bit of skepticism. So, which is fine. You know, a little healthy skepticism is always a good thing. So, yeah, and then my family is like fairly open to it. But in the beginning, I really didn't tell very many people what I was doing. I kept it pretty private. So having a group of people that I could talk to about this stuff and ask questions, like experiences I was having, doubts I was having, is huge. It really, really helps, especially with, again, an area of life that is still kind of considered, I don't know if taboo seems a little bit of a strong word. Like, I don't know that it's still quite taboo, but not super mainstream. Definitely more mainstream, I feel like, in the last 5 years, which is very cool. And if you look at like the astrology, like it makes a lot of sense. Like I think we really are moving to a time where that's gonna be more prevalent in society and more acceptable, which is very cool. But yeah, so that community really, really went a long way. Also just having a sounding board of someone who's been doing this, like my mentor truly has been doing this for like over 20 years. So like publicly, and like she's had this skill her whole life to connect. So, you know, because in the beginning you feel like you're just like fumbling around in the dark, you know, and you're just starting to explore connection. Like you don't really know anything. You don't, like, you can tune into like your intuition and you have a sense of what you think it means, but there's that doubt. And because again, we don't live in a society that really like supports this stuff, right? Or supports you connecting with your intuition or trusting your intuition. Like we really live in a society that is all about deferring to an external authority to tell us like what's right, or, you know, all that shit. So, which also is crumbling in my opinion, which is really, really wonderful. Anyway, I digress. So that was really, really helpful to have a support group. And then also just really helped to develop my skills. So I went from initially doing Akashic readings to now I do energy readings, which is essentially kind of like a psychic reading, but I just find, for me, calling an energy reading is much more resonant because everything is energy. And so I think it also just helps to give a broader perspective on what you can get out of the experience. You know, I think when people think of a psychic, they have a specific kind of idea of what that means, which is fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I think it's a little bit outdated, sort of the perspective on what that means. And so, but I mean, again, at the end of the day, just for me, that's what felt right, was to call them energy readings. And so I do still access the Akashic records, just I would say less informally. I think I definitely do tune into them during certain readings. It kind of just depends. I just like go with the flow with that. So yeah, so learning the mediumship, developing those skills really helped to improve my energy readings and my psychic skills. So that was a huge bonus. All in all, the experience was really great. So I'm now in year 2. She really encourages people to come back. You know, you can keep going like year after year if you want. It's totally up to you. And it just is community, further development, that sort of thing. Especially if you're like building a business, and you can have people to talk to about like building a business as a psychic medium and having that support and that community. So yeah, that's been super helpful. And I started offering mediumship readings say June of 2024. So it's been about 6 months of like publicly doing paid readings. So yeah, and my skills are always developing and getting stronger. Lots of new experiences all the time. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. I do want to dive deeper into a lot of these different aspects to further kind of explain things, get into the nitty gritty, get into more specifically some of the experiences that I like had to make sense of in the beginning. And then also just the process of like learning how to do a reading, learning how to like strengthen your skills, learning how to wrangle the ego. That's a whole video in itself, maybe a whole series. That is one of the most difficult things, I would say, is dealing with the ego. Also, if you don't have good boundaries, like emotional boundaries, that's also a huge thing, which I think is pretty common for people who do this work, because I think a lot of people who are psychic are empaths, and I wouldn't say that those are the same thing, and it's definitely not always the case, but I think it's like pretty likely. There's like a higher likelihood that someone who's an empath is also more likely to be psychic. So, you know, and empaths don't always have great boundaries. I think like working through like people pleasing and, you know, fixing things for everyone, you know, taking care of everyone else, it really, like, you really have to like have really good boundaries. So that's, again, another thing all in it itself as well. So yeah, I'm going to dive further into all of these things as we go, and yeah, we'll see where it goes, and hopefully this helps someone out there, right? So yeah, anyway, nice to meet you. Take care. See you next time.